Shannon Hader?
Shannon Hader,
Okay.
right. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I just moved to the area and I'm
Oh, okay.
kind of trying to get a feel for what's going on around here.
I'm Kaya. What was your name again?
Haley.
Haley? Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I'm glad you came.
Thank
well, I have a ton of food.
Okay.
And so please help yourself. And this is Martin and
Hi.
And we actually have two precinct captains from the Democratic Party
Okay.
here tonight. We have Byrne, who's in
Nice to
Tally,
meet you.
and Donna.
Hi, nice to meet you.
On the trilogy side, and this is Sandy, and this is Cheryl, and this is our daughter here. So you just moved here?
Yeah,
Okay.
my family moves around a lot for my dad's job, and we just moved to the area. So
Oh, nice. So are you in high school or
College.
Oh, okay.
Just finished my freshman year. And,
Oh, nice.
Where do you live?
we moved over into the Bonnie Lake area.
Oh, great. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to see
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. There's more going on politically in this area than I was expecting. And
I know.
Pleasant surprise.
Yeah. It's
I'm glad to see a college kid.
Yeah. So, but we have some drinks here, and you can help yourself. So, help us eat the food that is in our house. If it doesn't get eaten, we have to eat it. Which is fine, we'll do it.
Your fruit salad is good.
Thanks.
It is.
It's maple syrup.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and a little bit of
Okay,
Okay,
Mark,
tell me your name again.
Haley.
Where are you going to school, Haley?
I'm over at Western.
Western. I started out at Western. Only went 2 years there,
Okay.
and then transferred to POU.
Oh, okay.
So you're home for the summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Home for the summer and
You decide on a major?
right now I'm leaning towards biology, but I could nosedive into econ. We'll see.
There you go. Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great so far.
Has it? It's a great school.
Mhm.
Nice area.
Did you get your PE credit by going up on the ski van?
I haven't yet,
Oh.
but I was sick a lot this winter, so I didn't really feel like skiing. But I'm definitely going to next year.
That's how you pick up your PE credit, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. Are you living in the dorms or apartments?
Dorms.
Or house?
Dorms.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Okay.
It's really different from living at home, and I was like, I might as well go for the whole college experience while I'm
Yeah,
here.
but come on, you gotta admit, the food is pretty good. You know.
There's some nice restaurants there too.
Mhm. Oh yeah, for sure.
Our son used to live up there.
Except, so I had a bunch of my students up there
He
years
ate
ago.
out a lot.
When I went to Western, Stuart Anderson's of the Stuart Anderson's beef conglomerate owned our food service. So if you were around on Saturday, you would get yourself a raw steak. And then there was this big 10-foot square grill in the middle of the dining room. And you could grill your steak.
That sounds
So
fantastic.
it's great.
Yeah, I eat
One
out.
reason to never
I
go.
eat out more than my parents would prefer.
That's about ice cream shop down the hill, right?
Mhm.
Where's the fun campus? So ever hear of Tom Hartman?
I'm obsessed by Tom Hartman because he's talking a lot.
Okay.
So we make these, and you can just listen to him live. In Seattle, he's on 91.3,
Okay.
9 to noon. And he's a historian.
Oh, I'll definitely check this out. Thank you.
Yeah. And in fact, he shows Bernie Sanders the exposure to run.
Oh.
Because Bernie was
Oh,
on
that's
the
really
show
cool.
for like 11 years. The first hour of every Friday was called Brunch with Bernie.
Okay.
And I'd be driving my postal truck around Seattle and I'd be tuning in and it's like, And just when it was getting good, I had to go do my thing for the job.
That is.
So now I just download this podcast and I listen to.
I'm pretty sure my grandparents used to listen to this.
Somebody might be
Like, I remember my grandma telling me about this a ton last year, and she was raving about this Bernie Sanders thing on the radio, and I bet you it was that brunch with Bernie.
I bet you it was.
She's here.
That's so funny.
She's here.
Well, people love it, people, you know, all the time. You know, thank you for doing what you do.
Hey, that's not just.
I know. I wanted to meet the gracious host.
I'm glad you were able to make it.
Yeah, you bet.
Hi, Shannon.
Snacks, so you can help yourself. Yeah. So I'm Hannah, and this is my husband Martin. Nice to meet you. And I'm sure you've already met.
Yes, and hello.
And you met Sandy and Vern.
Hi.
My name is Haley.
Haley, nice to meet you.
Me too.
Andy.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Beautiful name.
He picks up the what a great contingent we had. It was great. Well, Donna put it together, but it was really good. We had the biggest contingent.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was really great.
I am loving all these like small town parades,
Yeah,
right?
the-
Totally person.
We blew up about 75 helium balloons as well.
Yeah.
Those out. So it was
Well,
really
that
good.
had
We had,
I'm sure, one of them,
we're in the 31st.
Everyone loves balloons.
Little kids, well, yeah, it was through the whole festival.
Yeah.
Kids are carrying around Democratic balloons.
Nice. I was just saw a huge contingent of Pat Sullivan's people up in Kent, I think, the other week.
Do you work in the summer or hang out?
I'm tutoring. I found a job through a high school in our area. They just like hook kids up with tutors for. I'm tutoring in French.
Not my language. Not at all.
What did you learn? Foreign language wise?
German and our son is deaf, so.
Oh, okay. ASL. Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna say I'm fluent because he's 30.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, he's 36.
Mhm.
Almost 36. No, almost 82. Yeah, almost 36. Okay, straight. And so ASL wasn't around back then. So I have this horrible morph ESS, exact sign, and yeah, ASL. So everybody makes fun of me when I can carry it off.
The more,
Okay, thank you.
So what do you want to do if you get a degree in biology?
I'm thinking going to med school, but I'm really not sure just yet. Maybe research, maybe work as an EMT. We'll see.
There you go. You get your EMT before you get out.
Yeah, that's the plan. I think I'm doing that next summer actually.
Very good.
I'm really excited. My friend and I are planning to do the wilderness EMT course together.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
that's a challenge.
Oh, for sure, but it should be a fun one.
Yeah, you gotta have some serious endurance to
Yeah.
backwoods and do that.
We both grew up doing a bunch of sports, so it should be okay, but I'm a little worried. We've moved around a couple of times, all mostly in this area. So up in Snohomish for a little bit. We were over kind of by Spokane for a couple of years. Did a stint down in Davis near Sacramento, and then moved back up here.
You graduated from Bilingual?
Yeah.
Did you like Davis?
Yeah, I actually love it. I really wanted to go to UC Davis for a while. It's a gorgeous campus, but since we came back up here, I wanted to be a little closer to home.
It's beautiful. We used to live in Concord.
Okay, cool.
And actually, one straight through Louis in Newberry.
Okay.
Do you really want to fill this out that hasn't already?
Got ours in our members.
Well, Porter is not.
She said that's some great parties.
Okay.
You know, every couple of years. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's weird, all of that together, but yeah, we're growing, right? That's how it is, so.
Yeah.
So, you guys have the best view of the mountain.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my
yeah.
goodness.
I'm Brandon.
Haley.
Haley, nice to meet you.
You too.
Hey, Brandon. Any other friends?
Yeah.
Great. Do you want one of these to go over? Alright.
My phone doesn't ring all day, honey, and then it rings twice in 5 minutes. My phone doesn't ring all day, and then it rings twice in 5 minutes.
Things we expect.
Right,
I
right.
think that is both the most important way we build confidence in people. And also the way we keep
Are you ready to go here? Do you already get? Pardon? Do you already get these?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So Donna has major ambition since she's been retired to be politically active, but she was before.
Okay.
She was before, but now that she's retired, she's.
Kind of how Vern is too, he dabbled a little bit, not hardcore, but since he's retired,
Hardcore.
she's hardcore.
Oh man, she's on doorbelling and you name it.
Well, there are people though that are more hardcore. Well, they're like knocking on doors every weekend, both days.
Yes, but we're at every community fair. We're marching in parades.
We were in the Wilkinson handcar parade, the 31st LD. We had a contingent on Saturday. So, our group meets and it was prior to the last Wednesday of each month. I think it's the last Wednesday.
So we asked, well, actually, she offered, because I called people. Yeah. So, Senator Campbell.
Oh, nice.
Came out, and one of our aides came out and talked to us about.
Good.
We had some really good conversation around school safety and.
Nice.
And actually, Bill's son, amazing, they're middle school, right?
Yeah.
Amazing, they said they had some of the best questions, and the one question I thought that sticks with me, I think is probably the most actionable, is asking about, why don't we study as a government, or as a
That's
nation, why don't we
exactly what I
study
was gonna
together?
ask, because you
Yeah.
work at the CDC.
This is my favorite topic.
Why don't we
So,
study
when we
what?
sit down, public health response to gun violence. Yes.
Right.
Prohibiting our
Yeah.
public health response to gun violence. Brilliant question from your child who's out here. Yeah.
Because they chose not to put out the statistics, right?
Well, no, it's even worse than that.
You're
So,
forbidden from using the money.
we have been effectively forbidden from gun violence prevention research for over 2 decades now. And it sort of got driven by the gun lobby and the NRA industrial complex, not NRA first, right, but the gun lobby complex, convincing everyone that you can't both have, let me say this a little bit, both have gun rights and also decrease death by guns, which is sort of silly. And I say a lot, the example is, that's like saying we can't have cars and decrease death by motor vehicle accidents, right? We figured out how to do it. We did a couple of decades of public health research, CDC and elsewhere, that we looked at seatbelts and airbags and speed limits and car construction and helmets and highway construction. And we figured out what worked to save lives, and we turned it into policy. Even though that policy wasn't necessarily very popular at first in every state, right? Remember seatbelt laws? People weren't always thrilled about those to begin with, or helmets.
Taken away our freedom, you know?
But we did it because we already had the proof it saved lives. And we saved nearly 500,000 lives since those policies have been enacted without repossessing a single car. I you know? But, you know, NRA got this, it's called the Dickey Amendment, added to the budget a little over 2 decades ago, that essentially said, CDC, you better stop doing gun violence prevention research. They actually said you can't advocate, but no government agency can advocate. So it was really a slap to say you're not allowed to do this anymore. They took away all of their gun violence prevention budget, and they fired the person who led the center that did all the gun violence prevention research, Dr. Mark Rosenberg. Okay, so we're left now, all these years later, not having looked at gun violence with that public health lens, right? Of looking at assaults and murders, but also looking at accidents and also looking at suicides, with 2 to 3 suicides for every one, you know, death by assault. And we could change that. So I love talking about this, because certainly talk about the standard things we can do immediately, like enacting 100% background checks, making sure the systems that do those checks actually work. You know, I'm for reinstituting the 1994 ban on assault weapons and the magazine clips and everything that goes with it. But this public health response, we've got to get CDC back on task. We have to say, you must do gun violence prevention research. We have to fund them to do it, and we have to say it can't be a business like usual approach. You know, I want to see, we don't have 2 decades to expand the toolkit for gun violence prevention, right? So hurry up, you know, give us a plan. Exactly, give us a plan in 90 days. Show the money going out the door in another 90 days, and report back every 6 months on progress and results, so we can turn those things that are working into policy. And I think we have a lot to do on that. Yeah, wish your son was here. We could like it. Actually, you know what? So Dr. Mark Rosenberg is the guy who's one of our national gun violence prevention scientists. He's the guy who got fired because of the Dickey Amendment. He spent his next 2 decades really having cross-partisan discussions about this very issue. You know, common sense to everyone doesn't mean the same thing, and that's why you want to know what works and things like that. And to the point where, at the time Congressman Dickey died a couple of years ago, he and Dr. Rosenberg had become really good friends, and Congressman Dickey says the worst thing I ever did was instituting that amendment. You know, so he changed his mind. And Dr. Mark Rosenberg has endorsed me as his candidate in this race, as he thinks that I think this is the only race he's endorsing in. First, you go up to the Hill and talk to your peers when you have some of these conversations, get stuff done.
Awesome.
Because I was on the Hill as a health policy fellow, Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellow in 2013, 2014, which was a year after Sandy Hook. Okay, and President Obama had signed an executive order saying, CDC, really, you can go ahead and do gun violence prevention research. They did nothing. Even though it was his appointee, who is a world-renowned public health scientist, and not, you know, a bozo or anything, absolutely refused to budge because they were so afraid they would get slapped down by Congress for doing it and have other funding taken away from other priorities.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So.
Well, the Republicans were in the majority. Wouldn't that play into
No, that's part of it, yes, but it's just. My colleagues at CDC are really good duty scientists and maybe a little bit meek sometimes.
Okay.
And they were just afraid of the purse strings, that Congress there would be a backlash because it came from the president and not from Congress. It didn't come with an appropriation to do it, it just came with the direction. So that's what chilling does, right? It's not always just a law, it's like panicking and paralyzing folks from moving forward on things, institutionally almost. So, yeah.
Do you think there's any chance that you could successfully repeal, like Democrats in Congress could successfully repeal the Dickey Amendment?
You know what? I don't think we even need to repeal that. What we need is an actual, either an appropriation or an authorizing, or both actually, authorizing bill that says go and do it.
Okay.
Because I think it's not, they wrote into the omnibus budget this year one clarifying sentence that says, oh yeah, CDC, you can do gun violence prevention research. That's not going to do it. I mean, to be really get, I sort of say what broke Humpty Dumpty won't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. You know, you've got to really leap in there to change into this big program. And part of it, you know, we would have to decide, and I think it's very feasible.
Okay.
With the right conversations and the right stakeholder leverage.
Okay.
Because it's done well, what it tells people, and people don't trust this, is these good evaluations should and can shift the burden on gun rights and the the number of lives saved, so that people don't feel like they're being pigeonholed, so you can prove there's not a burden, or, you know what I mean?
Question is, what is data for you?
Yeah. The NRA,
It's data.
yeah, well,
What are they afraid of? They already know the answer,
That's right.
that's the problem.
well, what this was in response to was actually these findings showing that households were less safe for children. That you had more deaths and more accidents. Yeah, and that was what the response to the Dixon Amendment was, because they were afraid that people were gonna use that data to then, get rid of the children. So they just terrorized us on it. Yeah. But yes, I'm really optimistic. That now's the time that can change that a little bit. Yeah. But it's not gonna happen by itself. Yeah.
And we're here, and also we're gonna talk about school.
Well, for us, I think that, what was actually for us was that, so in the omnibus bill, they included, I think it was HR 4909, and it's basically, it's $100 million, which pays for, training and then some, like, technology updating.
Okay.
But you have to think that $100 million does not stretch.
For state.
Yeah, it's crazy, and there's over 300 school districts in the entire state of Washington. So, and a training usually costs like, what, $300,000? So maybe you get 3 districts that get a training. I think generally, depending on the size of the district, but you guys pay a ton of money for outside utilities.
But we're talking about school safety training?
Yeah, so what school safety training does not look like, and I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with what school safety training looks like for teachers. But, so we live in an age where we have, we have lots of school shootings, and they're not a lot, but they're way more than is
They're more than-
You have to be
acceptable.
prepared.
There's
Everybody
more
has
than
to
there
be
should
prepared.
be.
Right, and so preparation includes something that's called, what is it called, remember?
Active shooter.
Active shooter training, that it's particular training, it's active shooter training, but it's kind of scary, like.
Oh, the
you
run,
Talking about pike code drill?
run, hide, and fight. So, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. So,
Been through it. I've done it. So I teach high school.
oh, okay.
So-
Yes. So, but we've got elementary kids that also are learning this, and it's sad that we have to do that. But there's also like facilities issues with schools and stuff like that. Where our schools, when people can just come in, they have a really easy access. Our district is, I think, doing pretty good with what they have, sort of. Some people may disagree.
right.
Are you here in Bonnie Lake or Derringer or Sumner, or where do you?
We're in Sumner.
Some.
Yeah.
That's Sumner Bonnie Lake.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
Well, it could be, unless you're real deliberate. And part of that goes back to the way schools are funded, specifically in Washington State. Traditionally, there's 3 plans for high school, 3 plans for elementary, 3 plans for middle school. Your district is given so many dollars dependent upon that plan, and if you choose to modify it, then it's on your district, okay? Or anything extra, insurance, whatever it is you're gonna do. So, of course, my school's out in the middle of nowhere, but, and school starts at 7:30, so by 7:40, our building is locked down except for one outside entrance. And that entrance is by buzzer only, and there's a camera on it.
Wow.
So it's totally easy to,
What school
yeah,
is that?
White River High School.
Okay.
Where, and, there's probably more guns out in the parking lot than kids' cars, but I would say that one of the most valuable things about going through the active shooter training is that it's not just about being safe at school. It's about being safe at a movie theater, or being safe at the grocery store, or just paying attention to your surroundings, and, you know, as drivers, I hope we all do, we know where our out is. You know, as you drive, you know where your out is, whether it's one shoulder or the other or whatever. But that's what we're trying to teach kids, is that they need to know where their out is everywhere, so that coming to school isn't just a scary thing.
Right.
You know, it's just a matter of taking responsibility for your own safety, I think is what it is. And statistics do tell us, you fight back, you're gonna get shot, but you probably aren't gonna take a fatal bullet if you're attacking in a group. And that's what our kids are taught to do. Our kids can use just about anything in our classroom as weapons, you know? Whether it's just throwing books or desks or, you know, I've seen kids chuck, they were dead Chromebooks, but do you know what that, you know, thrown like a frisbee, that sucker can do some serious damage and throw an attacker off guard. And you've just got to be willing to act together, you know, and it's a process, but it's
Right.
also something that can happen at home.
Yeah, I think for me and then sort of for some of the people that I had known is a lot of our kids are in elementary school, and so while it's, you know, it's important to have this training and to have our kids be prepared, it's also it's also somewhat alarming, I think, and I think that there's, I don't know, it's very alarming. You know, our group, I think, tends to stay away from sort of the more controversial issues like gun control and
What group are you talking about?
we're part of the Sumner Bonnie Lake Parents for School Safety, and so initially, we were just a Facebook group, but we've got a whole bunch of people in there. Some people that are, you know, more liberal and some people that are more conservative, but we were sort of brought together by this shared commitment to improving school safety. And so
Everybody wants their kids to
Everyone
be
wants their
safe
kids
when they
to
go to
be
school.
safe.
That is a huge unifying goal.
yeah, and so what we try to talk about there is like, what we try to focus on is just talking to the school about what efforts they're making, and then thinking about like, well, what can we do at a local level to support the schools. But really, at this point, you know, the schools have done everything they can locally, and they just need more funding to do, you know.
And I think that is a big part of the issue. Does it help for me to introduce myself? First, we should just continue the conversation, whatever's easiest for people.
Yeah.
But, maybe we'll finish this topic and then we can figure out a little bit more introductions. Maybe that's okay. So, I mean, I think I've seen a whole bunch of issues that you guys have probably talked about a lot. First of all, unfunded mandates, right? Wanting to have certain infrastructure changes or security changes, but not providing extra money to do it. So it just comes out of your teacher and your education budget, and that dials how much you can do or not, right? That's a problem, those unfunded mandates.
Well, I think it goes back to what I think a lot of this stuff is knee-jerk reaction to a problem, but we don't really define what the root causes are. And there's no one solution to this
That's right.
problem. There's not one.
That's right.
There's probably not even 100. But all taken in together, I'm of the mind that if you prevent one, you've done your job. And if you prevent 10,
Even better.
you're awesome.
That's right.
You know, you're awesome.
And we have some programs, and I don't know if you've talked about many of these programs that are promising in terms of, particularly for kids in junior high and high school or middle school and high school, identifying kids that have difficulties before there's a problem. And then you have to be able to link them to services. So the American Psychiatric Association has a program called Typical or Trouble, because, you know, the question, and it's for training school teachers and administrators and the adults that are in the school system, so to differentiate, like, that's just a teenager from someone showing some early signs of mental illness or adjustment disorders and stress, and then you need services to link them to,
Right.
if you've identified, and that lack of services can be a problem too. Sandy Hook has developed the foundation that's come out of the parents around it. I think 5 different trainings, again, or tools that address different aspects of long-term school behavior, like bullying. There's a sort of a see something, say something app that kids can anonymously sort of report into. But we only have really, they're doing a great job, but we only have really dabbling experience with these versus, you know, getting them to scale or seeing if they have impact at scale, so that we really have something that's a longer term investment as a complement to some of the security issues, I think.
So in this area, I've noticed in multiple school districts that the character development has, and anti-bullying, really the anti-bullying is wrapped into the character development, but that has been something that's given a lot more emphasis. I know, like, next year, I forget who was saying, it might have been Patricia was saying this, that, no, I heard this from someone else, but they were telling me that the first 3 days at the local high school, they're going to devote entirely to character development.
Wow.
Which is nice, because there's this focus, but then the problem there, the way that I see it, is that there's not, you know, it's fine to train teachers, but really teachers are there to teach, and that's what they should be doing. We don't have enough funding for mental health care providers. I know we're a little bit better here, but in North Carolina, we have some teacher friends in North Carolina. It's like 1 for 2,000, like a school psychologist, 1 for every 2,000 students, which is horrifying. I think it's a lot better here. I think it's 1 for every, is it 500 or something like that? Okay, so it depends on the district, but it's still not sufficient to like, if our schools are gonna focus on mental health, it's not enough to just train teachers. We need people who actually have the real, you know, education and background and training to provide that for our students. And so I feel like any sort of money that goes towards schools, aside from that like very paltry $10 million, it needs to include that character development component or that mental health component. And I know a lot of the talking points are like, oh, it's mental health, or oh, it's gun control, but I really feel like kind of both, right?
I think especially in the school environment, right? Because in many cases we're talking about, in most cases, right, we're talking about kids who have grown up, and whether it's to the same high school of their peers or, you know, to the grade school that's there, they've been part of the community in a way versus coming from outside the community.
Right.
So you're talking about really community support, so your microcosm. What other things would you guys like to see in terms of transforming school safety?
I think this is way bigger than just schools. I mean, you can walk down the school and you can have biometrics and you can have, and I'm not saying no to any of those things at all, but we have a national mindset that's just wrong when it comes to guns. And I think we can all agree that if we want to solve gun violence, you need fewer guns. I'm saying this as a person who used to sell guns in a former career. And I saw my share of crazy people and my share of incredibly responsible people. And the ratio was like 1 to 1,000,000. I mean, it was a big gap, but it only takes one, and like they say with terrorism, we have to be right all the time. They don't have to be right once.
We, in healthcare, we call them never events, right? You have to do everything perfectly to avoid these very rare things that can kill you, you know, or never events.
So, I mean, if you look at a lot of these events at schools, you know, they always point back to, well, we knew that kid was kind of weird or had some problems. But, you know, I think we all juxtapose what's going on now with what was going on when we were kids in the same or a similar situation. We didn't have character development. You know, we didn't have those things, and we didn't have people going to school and shooting children.
Well, but now you also have the technology, so they may not just be getting bullied in school, but it can continue after when they go home. So I think technology is a piece of the puzzle.
It is, and that's why I say it's a multifaceted approach that we need to take, but I know, just as with cars, seriously, if you wanted to stop car deaths, the easiest way to do it, the most cut and dried way to do it, is to not have any cars on the road. So we have to balance that not very pragmatic solution with how we do our And you see a lot of these events are, kid got the gun from his parents. And I want to see more parents prosecuted for negligence and for homicide. Because not locking up your guns, not storing them properly, is your fault, and you are complicit. And I know it's horrible your kid just murdered a bunch of people. But you have to pay. You did something really, really wrong, and you need to pay. That's not going to solve the problem for what's already happened. And I don't necessarily believe it's a deterrent.
Yeah, I don't think it's a deterrent.
But-
Because people don't take it. That's the problem.
But I'm from California, where there's a lot of guns, but there's also pretty strict gun control. My father-in-law, who passed away a couple months ago, was a police officer, and he became a lawyer. And he said, when you go to a Nevada gun show, go look at the parking lot. They're all California plates. So the states need to get together to have uniformity. There's a whole rash of things we need to do to solve this, but I think it's unfortunately it's almost in our DNA.
See, the problem is, I'm gonna push back on this idea of the states getting together to have uniformity, because there's a very, very scary, I don't know if it's
The reciprocity bill,
Yeah,
reciprocity, which is the lowest common denominator kind
Yeah.
of bill,
And
without choice of the
Do you wanna
states.
explain it? Because you talked about
Yeah.
that too.
It came out of, I think it was started by either senators or congressmen who were upset with Washington DC with the district gun laws, and so they crafted this I can never say it, reciprocity bill. That, we have reciprocity as Washington state with other states, but we have some requirements. Age requirements, fingerprint requirements, and there's, I think, 2 other things before you can grant someone a concealed carry license here based on their having gone into a different state. But Washington decides what those standards are and can raise them or lower them as a state as we see fit. This bill was to say, originally I think applying to DC, but then I think wanting to take it bigger, to say, if you have a concealed carry permit in any state, then DC has to let you concealed carry it. And maybe we'll expand that to all the other states too, which essentially is a minimum standard that becomes the convening authority across the state.
And I thought, I misspoke when I said the states need to get together. I think the federal government needs to tell the states what to do. And I don't care about states' rights at that point. I have a right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. I can't do that if I'm dead.
What are the standards that you would like to see in that kind of?
Well, comprehensive background check where there's a national database and whether it's, a linkage between different states. I don't know. I don't know how that would look from a practical standpoint, but from a conceptual standpoint, we have a database of felons. We know who they are. Let's start there. And then I don't know what to do about mental health patients, because that's a real can of worms because of privacy and all that kind of stuff.
Can you still, buy guns online?
Yeah, a lot of people do.
So
Internet sales,
it's been a long time since I sold firearms.
yeah.
It was the early to mid '90s in California. There was a 15-day wait. But you could literally go into a gun shop, or my store, it wasn't a gun shop, it was a sporting goods store. Go into my store and not only purchase a rifle, but take it home if it was considered a relic or a curio.
Those are considered what?
A relic or a curio, like a collector gun, like a World War II rifle from Yugoslavia. We sold hundreds of those, thousands of those. And they were sniper rifles that you could buy right
Sorry,
then and
my
there.
mind went to AK-47, the most common, gun in the rest of the world, that's a relic, unfortunately.
So
That wasn't
you
here,
could
but-
do that then. I would imagine you can.
What if we also say that it causes damage? It can cause damage. You need it for your car.
Right.
I think the challenge is that puts an economic litmus test on it rather than necessarily a responsibility litmus test. Like that. We then apply sort of the guidelines unequally, and it's usually the poor people or communities of color that miss out. It's not usually the folks in Sammamish who will not be able to get their liability insurance. But I think this
But
issue
people that are killed and families, I mean, if they're not covered themselves properly,
Well,
The
you know how you
biggest
could solve for
barrier
that? Gun registration fees could go into a trust that is basically an insurance company, so that when your family member does die in an act of gun violence, he or she, there's a death benefit or a medical benefit. That we can get around all these things
well, if we
with
have
some
single
creativity.
payer healthcare, we don't have to worry about medical.
So, I mean, I think there's a couple of things that are actually interesting to think about. I don't know if you guys have talked about it. I think one of the things that has happened over the years is there's actually legislation that prevents gun manufacturers from being held liable
Yes.
for gun deaths. So that is.
And that's the only industry where that exists, right?
That's exactly right. In terms of, there is actually a little interesting thing around vaccinations or immunizations, vaccines, because drug companies became afraid to even manufacture vaccines for what they feared everybody would just sue them for anything, a lot of spurious suits. And so they created, the US, the government created a pool, like a joint insurance pool, that money goes into from all the pharma companies, and I think we put some appropriations in from the US. And that's the pool that handles any liability related to vaccines that's non-negligent. I mean, if they manufactured a bad vaccine, that would be something else, but in terms of contamination or something like that. But I think in terms of universal background checks, that is absolutely something that is doable and something that's concrete that we could set as a national standard. In terms of both requiring that all gun sales, including internet gun sales, including relics, have to participate in the background checks. But also right now, the data that goes into the background check system is sort of optional. So different states fill it out with different completeness. So it's not very useful. So you can require the minimum amount that has to be in there.
And we have to register for everything
Yeah.
else. And you wanna go on an airplane, you have to.
So what people will say to that is, those other things aren't rights.
They're not in the
They're
Constitution.
privileges.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
It should not be a right. It's a privilege. You don't have that right if you commit a felony. That's taken away from you.
Yeah, that's true.
So why don't you have to prove your worthiness before you get it?
I do believe in the Second Amendment. I have family members who, my niece and her nephew own a hunting fishing guide association. So they feed their family based on responsible gun ownership, and it's their responsibility to make sure their clients
But
are
the
safe
Second
over there,
Amendment doesn't
too.
talk about hunting.
I realize that, but
It talks about a militia. Where's our militia?
yeah, we're just gonna disagree on that a little bit, only because I think
I think we're
it's a
gonna
little bit
disagree a lot.
different. Yeah.
Because it doesn't say that.
Yeah.
And I'm all for
Yeah.
gun ownership.
I'm not fighting you on what the Second Amendment says. I'm just saying that personally,
I think
I
somebody
do think it's
should.
important to have the Second Amendment. And I think that we can still find ways to decrease deaths by guns at the same time. Second Amendment we don't have to have rights without responsibilities.
Right.
We can have rights with responsibilities, and that's sort of, I think, what a lot of our discussions are right now, is defining what the volume of those responsibilities are, or how do you make them not just rhetorical? you know, not just a feel-good bill that then never gets implemented. We have some of that, right, already, and King County has tried to do some things about that. One example is King County looked at everybody who had a court order to relinquish their firearm, usually because of domestic violence or something like that. And they found out only half the people actually turned in their firearm because it was a completely passive thing. You had to go back and turn in your firearm. So they put together a team, it's got social workers and police officers, and they go out, wait to see who doesn't turn in their firearm, and then they go out to the household, not during an emergency, not during a 911, you know, event, and say, hey, you know, we see that you have a court order and you're not turning it in, we're here to collect it. So far, everybody's turning it in, okay? Because they knew they had to, but they weren't going to actively do it themselves. But they had to cobble together about $800,000 to pay for the team, and they're doing an evaluation with it. And if we want some of these policies not just to be either rhetorical or halfway done, we then have to invest in what the implementation is going to be as well. And I think that's part of the background check issue too. We haven't done that. Obama had written an executive order, because you talked about mental health issues too. That never got implemented, and Trump repealed. That would have actually let the background check system talk to our Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security system, so that folks who had diagnoses of severe mental illness that would disqualify them in many states for firearm ownership would be flagged in the system. But that never got implemented and has gotten repealed. So I do think there are a lot of options to start making progress, but we've got to pick some to start and actually make them real, and I think some are important.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So with regard to, with regard to executive orders,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Because I see, like, you know, when the guy that you like or the lady that you like is empowered, executive decisions and orders are really, really nice, but they're not so nice when they're not.
There we go, right.
So what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
on this one?
Well, you know, we can't change executive orders, but not all executive orders are created equally. There is how much is overreach and how much is real. That's actually a big deal. You have more room for executive orders when you don't have any definitive legislation that has already given you the parameters. To me, certainly right now, but I think anytime, this is what's been intended by 3 branches of government, is to be able to hold each other accountable. We're not seeing that right now, right? We're not seeing the leadership in the House holding this executive accountable whatsoever. And they could be, but they're not. They're choosing not to be. And that is part of the reason I think it's so critical to flip the leadership of the House right now. Wonderful. To be able to hold the executive accountable on this. So I think for executive orders, you got to have the 3 functional branches of government to be strong and to be truly independent, so that you can put some parameters on those orders.
So what I'm hearing is just to clarify, is that rather than taking away executive powers, you're saying that we just need to sort of ride this out and get a stronger Congress.
No, well,
is that what you're
riding out? We've got what, 3 months till the election, 4 months to the election.
It's a really long time.
I think in any case, executive orders, your parameter for controlling them is having a strong judiciary and a strong Congress that is going to put parameters around them. I don't, and maybe there are some lawyers in the room that know more than me, but I do not see any option for eliminating executive orders. I think you would have to have a huge, I don't know if it even, how you would pass something like that, but I don't see it actually happening. For that reason that you said, you know, nobody wants it when they're empowered. But Congress can, in their legislation, create parameters that take away the gray area in a lot of these things and control the impact or the degree of impact you can have. Yeah.
So I have another question.
No, that's good. Sure.
So
That's a good question.
Okay, so my other question has to do with policy and how it's sort of made. So, like, I know that when between No Child Left Behind, I think because my husband is in education, and I did a little bit of education. I tend to know a little bit more about education than other stuff. But like when we had No Child Left Behind, and then you had the okay, so what's it called?
Student Succeeds Act.
Okay, like so I was never really sure like how much. It seems like there was like a framework where you had to meet these requirements or whatever. So, but generally in policy, how much is actually like spelled out in terms of like this is how we want you to do it. These are the steps. These are the procedures. Is it often like that? Is it always like that, or is it seldom like that? And what do you think is sort of the ideal?
Yeah. Great question.
Okay.
And the reality is it depends on whoever writes the bill and whether or not people vote for it. It could be a ghost bill or it could be a very detailed bill. And that is determined by who writes it and who votes for it, really. So maybe this might be a good time to get a little bit more background on myself, if that's okay. Just one person speaking. So I'm an older girl, born and raised down the road there. Grew up and on my great-grandfather's old farm property. Dad's a bowling guy. Mom taught sort of dance and art at community centers. And I graduated Auburn High School and went off to Stanford, became the first person in my family to get a 4-year degree. Went on to become a medical doctor, so I'm an internist, a pediatrician, a public disease doc, and a public health doc. So I am sort of obsessed with public health responses to a lot of different questions because I think they're usually multifaceted and don't require all or nothing, because you got to make progress. And when I was done, with my training, I chose a life of service. I joined the Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service, which is one of our 7 uniformed services in this country, and joined the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as a virus hunter or an epidemic intelligence service officer. And ended up being stationed and deployed all over the country, all over the world, fighting disease, saving lives. I was back there most recently in a job you might have read about, sort of a big job, a global HIV and TB job, where I did have, a huge team, 2,000 people, 45 countries, $2.4 billion a year, and a lot of accountability for that program. And that's part of the reason I wanted to lay that out there before we talk about what bills do and don't do and what, how do you tune them up, tune them down. With that is a unique program, this global HIV program, that is called the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It is a successful bipartisan program in this day and age, or PEPFAR. When I left, my team had contributed to directly contributed with our partners, more than 7 million people being on life-saving HIV treatment, more than 2.2 million babies being born HIV-free across this globe who otherwise would have been infected. Yeah, pretty cool. That's partly why I'm a true believer of what you can do in government. That PEPFAR original authorization, this is a bipartisan program that's successful. It was started under George W. Bush. And during that original authorization, they got a lot more detailed than we generally get in our global health and development appropriations or programs. They set up a structure for oversight. They said it's going to be different from just a general global health program. We are going to make this a whole of U.S. government structure so that any U.S. agency that touches global HIV around the world has to come together and plan together and share their data so we know what everybody's doing, no ability to hide it away, and we're going to put a coordinator in an independent agency, and they put it in the State Department, so that every U.S. agency, CDC, USAID, Department of Defense, NIH, HRSA, Peace Corps, couple more, all had to come under this sort of oversight authority, modeled after a Joint Chiefs of Staff model, with the idea that you might not always agree on your perspective, but the program will be stronger if you have a bunch of different experts trying to figure it out and having to be transparent about what they think. The other part that was included in that bill has to do with purpose and accountability. So in addition to that oversight structure, and that coordinator had authority over any dollar spent on global HIV. Didn't matter if it came through that appropriation or somebody else. You had to answer with your data. But the reporting structure and the intent structure is they set out big goals no one thought they would achieve. The first goals in that bill were called 2-7-10. What was it? 2 million people on HIV treatment in 5 years, when there have been less than 40,000 in the entire world. 7 million people reached with prevention and 10 million orphans taken care of. I think that was it, 2-7-10. So bold goals that no one thought that were achievable at all. And they said, and you're going to have to come up with metrics that show whether you're performing on those 2-7-10 and report annually with both the budget and the performance so that we can see what's happening. Fast forward 15 years later, that program has gone through 2 bipartisan, bicameral reauthorizations with unanimous consent. And I am completely convinced the reason that not only is that program paying dividends, you know, it's gotten great results, but it also has great bipartisan support, is because the way it was set up in the bill. And it's not that it stayed stagnant, it's dialed up and changed a little bit over time. But this idea that we put out a core goal, which was transforming the face of the world for HIV, you then didn't require a purity of motive. Everybody had different reasons for supporting that goal, but you laid out some of these expectations, the oversight and accountability, so you could show value and then chart your way forward together. I think it's tremendous. Huge amount of work. Does every single program we do need that kind of structure? Probably not, but a lot of them could probably benefit from that a little bit more. I think there's a lot of waste in a lot of our programs that would be great if we got a handle on it, so we could put that waste back into the things that are going to deliver. And there's also a lot of our programs that suffer from lack of momentum, right? People are afraid to move or innovate because then they're afraid they're going to lose what they got, even as our world changes. And we have to be able to incentivize moving forward to the next thing.
So how do you talk to someone who says to you that that type of policy making and that type of government structure is just it's big government and it's not what I am interested in or believe in? What would you say to that?
Yeah, you know, I don't know in this case, and I'd probably describe it a little bit more, because I don't think it's really big government. It's saying if you are government and you're getting money, you're going to have to take care of it.
Right.
And, you know, and that's actually really how I talk about budget a lot. And you'll notice on the back of my cards, accountability and transparency is a really big deal to me. Because to me, I've had the privilege of being responsible for our tax dollars.
Right.
Huge amounts of them, even little amounts of them, but huge amounts of them. And I know what it takes for those tax dollars to be earned and contributed, right? And so to me, a lot of what my expectations are for our federal budget overall, for government programs that are supported by federal dollars, is really the idea of value. Is it more or less, or is it first what value are we getting out, and then can we invest more when we see the value coming? Or do we dial back investments if we're not getting value out of it? Or do we change what those investments are if something's not working so we can find something that works? And I think that kind of sort of budgetary or fiscal responsibility resonates with a lot of folks, and along the political spectrum. And I think this year is going to be a really tremendous year to counteract the assumption that Republicans are somehow fiscally responsible and Democrats aren't, because we're even seeing in all the secretaries, you know, fraud and misuse of government funds. I was just reading everything about sort of Scott Pruitt's trip to Italy, and, you know, Secretary Price, who left the $340,000 he's expected to pay back, or he should be held accountable to pay back because of the waste on federal travel he did. I think that kind of waste, under the guise of less government and let us do whatever we want, is exactly what people don't want to see coming out of their tax dollars. But it behooves us to point that out.
But what would you say to somebody who said, well, you know, it's fine and grand to have accountability, but the issue is not just accountability. It's also that I want my state, my community, my school district. We should have more autonomy.
Yeah.
And so then your idea of having a centralized authority is counter to that idea.
Oh,
See what
I
I'm
didn't
saying
mean to
there?
leave that with your impression. I think every program needs its own kind of transparency and accountability. The global HIV program I described
Mm-hmm.
is one where we as the US are facing the rest of the world. It's chaos. There is no state in that to do their own thing. You know, it's a US collaboration with the rest of the world. So that's why that specific structure fit that specific program. And I think that you need to tailor the specific structure to your program. You know, part of the reason I'm running for this job is that I don't think one-size-fits-all politics and policies are serving us well, okay? Particularly in our kind of district, where we have small to medium to teeny tiny little towns. Because a lot of times one-size-fits-all policies are driven by big places and lots of people, right? It's just the law of averages. It's not malice or anything like that. But it can leave the, you know, the reality being that both problems and opportunities are invisible, you know. Even the public health work that I talk about, even that global HIV program, but other public health work too, I don't practice one-size-fits-all public health. You know, I look at a specific community at a specific time. I listen to the community voice. We look at the data and the evidence that suggests what might work. We tailor together programs that are going to deliver results for real time into the future, not for someplace else and into the past. That takes a willingness and ability to do that versus having one size fits all. I believe that No Child Left Behind took a lot of that autonomy away from local school districts. ESSA is starting to put some of it back in, but it's not to the degree that we probably need. I think the intent originally for testing was not a bad thing, but now we've got plenty of experience saying it has not delivered what it was intended to, and in fact it's getting in the way of a lot of the flexibility and education we'd like to see for our kids. So that's why it's really sort of not as much of an all or nothing. Yeah.
I'd like to speak to what I hear you saying, the need for cooperation with people with other ideas. And I really like what I hear you saying about the only way we're going to move forward is to work together rather than bash, bash, bash. I really appreciate your outlook as what we want to find what works, not what's going to make you mad or what's going to turn you off or what's going to block your way. I think your approach is so very helpful and I do appreciate it.
Thank you. You know, we have a really big district, and have all of you been looking at sort of what our district is Washington's 8th congressional district? I know you have, and I know you have. But we're really big. We start up in Issaquah, Sammamish. We go all the way down through, South King County, so Maple Valley, Auburn, Enumclaw, get into Pierce, right, coming into Bonnie Lake, all the way down to Eatonville and Graham and Yelm. We go back up over the mountains all the way through Ellensburg to Wenatchee, East Wenatchee, and Lake Chelan. And Leavenworth too, and Cle Elum too. There's a zillion little towns in our. We got Ording, we've got don't forget Ording. But the one unifying complaint, I call this our purple district, right? Because we have Republicans and Democrats, we have purple families. It's going to stay purple for a while. We're optimistic about flipping it, both because of what the compelling needs in the country are right now, but also Hillary Clinton won this district by 3 points. Even though on the same ballot, Dave Reichert won by nearly 20 points. So people vote for the person more than the party. When he stepped down and this became an open seat, it became a big deal race. A chance for people to choose from scratch for the first time in 14 years. But to me, the one most unifying complaint I have going across this district, this purple district, is lack of action and lack of results in Congress. That everything is stuck at this 40,000-foot all-or-nothing positional debate, and the things that we do agree on we're making zero progress on, and they're being held hostage to just what you're saying, the pokes on this side. And, there's going to be some stuff that has to be up there, absolutely, but there's other things that we should be making progress on as we go.
And I just want you to know that my message is what's not what I believe, and I just want to know your response.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And this is a luxury that we have when we sit down in living rooms, is to have an actual conversation about things, right? And not just have a 90-second soundbite or a 30-second answer. Because I sort of think most of our problems that we care about are pretty complex, and if they weren't, we would have solved them by now. You know, if the solution fit on a baseball cap, we would have solved them.
Good point.
Right? So I love these kind of conversations and, you know, welcome them, really.
So I just kind of have a statement where I just think big money. Is anybody familiar with ALEC, A-L-E-C? It's the American Legislative Exchange Council. And members join it. It's like $10,000 to join. And what they do is, and it's a lot of rich and business people, and they get together and they write laws, and then they go lobby them. And of course, they've got backing of money, and the bills that ALEC writes are a lot of what gets passed, or is at least introduced in the legislature. And, you know, and they're basically, the NRA has a seat in ALEC, and that's where the stand your ground law came from, where all you have to do is feel threatened and you're allowed to shoot someone, and it's mostly in the red states. But yeah, ALEC and the NRA wrote the stand your ground law, and most of the bills that get passed anymore are the bills that corporations want. And, you know, and this is what's so important with all of us, is we really need to take back our power, because they are just relentless. This is their life purpose. You know, we want to go hiking and whatnot, and this is what they do. They want power and money, and I think we've got a big climb.
It's a big climb, and what money buys is their ability to outnumber anybody else at the table too, right? So a union might have one lawyer, and the corporation up there might have 25 lawyers. Who's going to win the argument? I'm a big believer that, sorry, I lost my name tag. I know it's going to end up in my hair somewhere. I'm a big believer that we have to keep overturning Citizens United right in front of us, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a huge deal. That's a constitutional amendment, but just because it's a huge deal doesn't mean we can't have to, you know, we have to say over and over again, corporations are not people. I'm sorry, they really aren't.
Good point.
I have brought a lot of people back to life. I cannot bring a corporation back to life by chest compressions and antibiotics and everything else.
And
But you
they
can kill a
and-
corporation.
Oh, yeah.
And
You
they,
build one.
and they keep growing and getting
Yeah.
bigger, and
Well-
taking out the little ones, and we're having more monopolies anymore.
And we have scarcity that drives up prices because of some of this consolidation across a lot of different industries. We have scarcity sometimes of saline in hospitals because they're down to only one or two places they're manufactured. And if that warehouse goes offline for a week, there's a big old shortage and prices go up.
Oh my
So there's a
gosh.
lot of stuff going on. You know, in the meantime, I think we can't wait for Citizens United to be overturned to start introducing a lot more transparency. These super PACs are terrifying. We need to mandate that every dollar that goes to political purposes, we know who it came from, how much it is, and who it went to,
Good point.
right? We've actually had rollback on that even over this past week under rules making or regulation from the Trump administration. 501c4 corporations that are primarily social organizations, which is defined as only up to 49% of their money and time is lobbying, political. They used to have to report any money they got above $5,000. It didn't have to be public, but the IRS, I think, had to be able to review it. They decided to get rid of that requirement now, so that they don't have to report any of their money.
And that's policy, not legislation.
That is regulation, I think,
Regulation.
as opposed to legislation. Now, we can legislate it away, but that takes creating legislation that would change that. This race is going to be a hotbed of the ill effects of that kind of money. Dino Rossi, who we can all assume is gonna go through the primary on the Republican side, he has been, during this year, the Republicans' #2 top money raiser in the entire country of all house races. And that's just the transparent money. 4 super PACs have agreed to back him in this race, including Paul Ryan's super PAC that has already opened an office in Issaquah. So once we get back to the primary, this general is going to be a hotbed of seeing everything that money can buy.
So are you accepting, like, large donations as well, or how, or like,
So those
or
super PACs don't donate to the
organizations
candidate.
working on your behalf?
Yeah. The thing about the super PACs is they have to have a wall between them and the campaign, so they're not coordinated, but that campaign certainly welcomes them in.
Right.
For me, in terms of PAC money, whether it's unions or businesses, and that's still transparent money. That's like your $5,000 that comes from a PAC, not a super PAC that is in this all dark area. We don't really have the super PACs on the Democratic side that the Republicans do. We will never have that kind of money in a race. But for me, I always say, hold me accountable. You won't see me taking money from the IRA. You're not going to see me taking money from Big Pharma. You're not going to see me taking money for tobacco. So I'll be transparent and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not taking money from organizations that don't reflect my beliefs. Those organizational PACs are contributions of that organization's members. So like unions have contributed to their union PAC, and they are the ways they put their money together to have more power.
The DNC does see this as one of the top races in the country, right?
Yeah, considered one of the top 10, top 5, top 10 races in the country in terms of the 23 seats we need to flip the leadership of the House. Yeah, it might actually be the seat on election night that determines whether or not leadership of the House flips. So the first time in a long time, everybody else is going to be waiting up for our return instead of our feeling like everything's determined before we're even done voting. So I'm getting a little, cheer out of that.
Vote from Leavenworth.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
let me, this talks about campaign philosophy
Yeah.
as well as some other things. I would expect the PACs, the super PACs, and the Rossi campaign to follow suit from the executive branch and not behave with dignity or care, shall we say.
Why ever do you think that?
But again, I think this goes back to one of the roots of our gun problem in our safety at school is our example in the leadership of our country who is not speaking kindness, inclusion. I mean, that doesn't mean politicians can't have tough talk. Yeah, just being civil.
Civility is very important.
And I know you can't control a lot of what the PACs do say, but what do you think you would expect to see coming out of the RNC's push in the
Yeah. Well, so we already heard this week that they just spent about $200,000 on television ads that will be addressing one of the corporate PACs that will be addressing tariffs and trade, or trade policy, or Republican super PAC, the taxes and tariffs, and they're going to promote something good about that. It's going to be weird, but in a bigger sense. When I first got into this race, my sort of political strategist, she's like, Shannon, you got to be ready for on August 8th, you're going to wake up, you're going to open the newspaper or click on the newspaper, and you're going to see the worst photo you've ever taken in your life with you standing next to Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, and you're going to be like, when did I ever meet them? I don't remember that, and it's going to be no holds barred. I say, and this comes into the strategy you talked about, the thing that we have to remember is this is not a presidential race, with hundreds of millions of people. This is a congressional district of 700,000 people, about 300,000 voters, and we're lucky if we get a quarter of folks voting. Right? Drives me crazy too. So we know by now that the best antidote to sort of misinformation, smear campaigns, and ugliness is not correcting information. It's having people have met you, or meeting someone who has met you. Because then you're comparing a real person to a television commercial campaign, and guess what? The real person wins. That is in part, I think, on another level, and you've heard me say this before, I never imagined it not being the center of my campaign, because I was, I'm an HIV doc, so I was professionally raised by the HIV community, which we have made 3.5 decades of progress under the community mantra that is nothing about us without us, So I was sort of, it wouldn't occur to me not be a politician and not think that this was the priority for what you're doing with your time. And I think already that kind of focus on the field game, going to where people are, meeting them, and I meet not just, folks I think are going to vote for me. I've been meeting the mayors and the orchardists and the ag, some people who I know absolutely won't be voting for me, but I need to learn what is important to them, to be ready to govern. But people are responding. I think particularly when we get into South King County and East Pierce, there are places where I have door knocked or asked to get a meeting that they say, we haven't met a Democrat for federal office in like 30 years. Thanks for coming by. And I think that has led to some of our wonderful LDs, like the 31st. Every single legislative district and county district Democrat group that has endorsed in this race so far has endorsed me. And 12 out of the 15 of those local grassroots STEM groups, I'm their sole endorsed candidate in this race.
And in our district, 2-1.
Yeah. Almost all of them have been 2/3 or higher.
Really?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And, you can talk about what the LDs have been doing over the last 18 months, which is knocking on neighborhood doors to do deep listening to figure out what folks want out of a politician, what they want out of the issues. And so to me, it's a really good stamp of approval that folks who've been talking to all their neighbors are putting their eggs in my basket, yes.
And this year, the state has employed field organizers, where in the past, we were kind of all on our own. So, Nick Pennington, he's been coordinating canvassers. And you all have been canvassing relentlessly. I'm so impressed with that.
But even the red communities like Wilkeson and Buckley, I mean, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere this last couple of weeks, where you're getting the thumbs up, and we were the biggest contingent, and people were genuinely glad to see us. So that's kind of cool. So
I
just
didn't
have to
get
take
any
pictures.
middle fingers.
That should be the barometer, right? I went to Lake Taps Resist, had organized with the Indivisibles and others a sign waving at one of the corners about the kids being separated from their parents. And they said it was fundamentally different than last year when they did something like this. First of all, they had 150 people and 2 dogs, just 4 corners there. But also, it was so cool to have like these big rigs driving by and going like, yay, so it was really great for breaking down stereotypes too, because you couldn't predict who was going to be honking and positive, and most people were not rude if they weren't, agreeing, but it was really cool.
It was.
So how are you gonna get the young people to come to vote?
So, a few ways. Number one, a lot of my staff are young. That's always a good thing. Yeah, Brandon, you're getting old. Older head. That's why he's got a senior role of responsibility.
You know what you do here?
that there really are younger people than me, and I'm just not used to that in politics.
Way to go.
It happens to all of us, honey, I just tell you.
That's a good sign though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
The Pierce County Young Dems and the King County Young Dems have both endorsed me in this race. And beyond that, I think I am reaching out to a lot of folks who should have young people in their lives. And I'm so glad you were here. Let's just say you get like brownie points, and now you get the task of recruiting 10 of your friends.
All right, I just moved here, so I don't know how successful that'll be, but I'll give it a shot.
It's a good way to introduce yourself, you know?
This is true.
That's way up there.
Yeah, but
And I
everybody
think our
has a
biggest-
ballot that's going, they get to still vote in their home.
That's true, because a lot of,
Wherever they want.
this area goes up to us.
You get to pick your ballot place. But I think the big challenge is getting the millennials and the younger part of the millennials to go from marching to voting. I went down in May to Eatonville High School, and it is a pretty solid school. I mean, I saw posters back to 1928 or something crazy. Yeah. And I went around classroom to classroom, and they did a senior assembly at the end. And about 120 seniors, about their class, came in, and I said, okay, well, I'm a public health doc, so at least one thing I have to do is I have to start with a survey, because, you know, we do surveys. And I said, okay, if you're already 18, raise your hand. And a bunch of kids raised their hand, because it was almost graduation, right? And said, okay, well, if you're going to be 18 by, let's say, I don't know, August 7th, raise your hand. And a lot more hands came up. I said, okay, keep them up. If you're going to be 18 by November 6th, you know, raise your hand. I said, now, if you're already registered or pre-registered to vote, keep your hand up.
Ooh.
Like 10% of the kids. And that's a problem, you know.
600,000 to 300,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, and the public schools cannot keep you out of the school to do voter registration. So if you can get people in there, we do voter registration at our school in the fall, and then they do it again at the beginning of the second semester, and our teachers actually do it in class. They tell the kids, bring your driver's license, here's the website, you know, register. Of course, they always tell the guys this is gonna, you know, help you qualify for, you know, your student loans if you know, because you have to do selective service, yada yada. So there's kind of double-edged sword there for the boys. But it just, like you say, you got to get the people there and that are willing to do it. And so, you know, Roger knows our
They all
school.
have to take social studies.
Well, in this school, they have to take a global civics requirement to graduate. So it's not a turned off school. The principal was sitting next to me, and his jaw dropped. And he said, oh my gosh, we just had a bond measure that failed. I'm like, see, you should have gotten your seniors registered and getting them to like push their parents, right? So that hit home to him.
So when do they need to be registered by?
You know, you can still register now, but you have to go to the office to do it, I think. Internet-based registration had to be by a month in advance. Now folks have to go down to do it.
But for the general election,
Plenty of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when you're elected, can you please change that law? It says everybody's just registered. You belong here, you're registered, done.
We can sure try. Washington has done a great job in just this last session in Olympia of passing some voter laws that will make it much more likely that everybody who's eligible to vote actually has the opportunity.
Good point.
Yeah, they passed a pre-registration law, so every kid, I think when you go in and get your driver's license at 16, you'll automatically be pre-registered, so that when you turn 18, you start getting a ballot. That still leaves us with a gap year, right, of kids who already are in the system, not in the system. They passed same-day voter registration, so that there will be no waiting period. But a lot of what we have as best practices, or will have as best practices here in our state, are not nationwide right now. And I think there are so many attacks upon voters right now that's something that we should really address. Australia, you get fined on your taxes if you haven't voted that year.
Wow.
I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I would love that. You know? Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah. You don't have to vote for anybody, but you have to turn in a ballot, you know?
Hey, but we work in high school, so we can fix that.
That'd be great.
but I still didn't get my question answered. How are you gonna get young people to come out and vote?
By talking to all of my friends and supporting an excellent candidate that just already has the qualifications.
How do you get the people that never vote?
Yeah,
The people that never vote?
Yeah, like the ones that aren't your friends.
and they're registered, but they
well-
don't. A perfect example is my 23-year-old. He's been registered since his 18th. We yell at him every election. Has he voted yet?
So I'm gonna say to you, Brandon.
I do have an answer.
Yeah, I wanna hear it.
Well, no, but I mean, I think the reality
That's all that
is,
I need.
part of what we're doing, yes, some of it is youth targeted and social media, because that's what people want to hear, oh, social media, but social media is not magic. It has not been translated
Can you
to
vote
votes.
online?
You can't.
That's why.
That's why,
Take
but
it
that's true. It's gonna take effort for
Just
people
vote
to
like
do
that.
it.
Yep.
So,
Young people vote twice.
Yep.
yeah, a second part is talking about issues that are important to young people. That includes things like student loans and the horrific interest rates people are paying for their student loans already. Includes things like jobs and includes things like apprenticeship programs, all those kind of things. But the third element is actually all of you guys. I spend a lot of time talking to grown-ups about if you ever have a year that you gotta motivate your 23-year-old son.
I do try. I don't
There you
know what to
go.
do. I like making him come. He does it, we give him that money, so.
Yeah, oh
Then I
yeah.
do it.
You know,
Drive,
what if
fine, whatever.
ballot parties at your home, people who are not
Yeah.
sure how to fill out their ballot, they've never,
We
some
did,
of them just
we
don't
just,
even understand.
we just had 13 million people vote for Gene Segura to be a Major League Baseball All-Star.
Yeah, they can do that.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
Because you can do it online, you can do it multiple times,
Yeah.
and they had a pizza party at Safeco Field. So maybe we need to have a pizza
As long
party.
as they can
A
make
lot of
sure.
communities are doing those kind of smaller ballot parties, just like you're talking about, make an event around it. Yeah.
So
That's a good
brief-
idea, actually.
briefly, if Shannon will allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go for it.
So to your question, on what will I do, what I usually tell my friends and other young people who for whatever reason aren't voting is that, okay, maybe you don't care about politics. Most people do when they learn about it, but your landlords, your bosses, they care about voting. They care about politics. And they're the ones that control your wage and that control your rent.
Good point.
That's good,
So
I like that.
I have to tell you this story. I just met this woman who's, I don't know, I just feel like I got a lot of information from her. But like, her kids are all, one of her kids is transgender and is undergoing the transition, and another of her kids is LGBTQ but not transgender, and they complain about like all their rights being stripped away, so they know they're fully aware of like how what is currently happening will impact and is impacting them, but they still don't vote.
Wow.
So like,
It's like people who smoke and they know they get cancer and die, they still do it. People are not rational.
Through their cigarette company.
And I think, to me, a bigger thing that I've noticed, just my personal opinion from going through this campaign, is we do have a cultural problem here, I think. And we have, in part, I believe, a cultural problem that you don't talk about sex, religion, or politics in, mixed company or good company. And I'm finding that I think that means a lot of folks who might be less passionate and more moderate or more wanting to reach across the aisle, they don't recruit 10 people to come and make sure they go to a ballot party and vote. They don't even know necessarily which of their friends are interested in talking politics or not, because you want to stay so far away from it, because we don't have a pattern anymore, or maybe we never did, of civil discourse on politics. I think it gets in the way for a lot of folks.
Well, you know what's weird? It's weird to me that I grew up with my grandparents. I lived in their home the first 20 years of my life. And they always voted. They never talked about it. They didn't talk about it to their friends. You didn't know who they voted for. And now we're completely opposite. I voted for him or her, and everybody's like dug in, they got their thing, but I think fewer people vote now than they did 40 years ago. I could be wrong, as a percentage of the population, the eligible population.
What do we have, 45% of the population voted for president?
That's a high number.
I don't think it was that high.
Yeah, it's not that high.
I think that may be been the number registered, but half of those voted. I think about 20 to 25% of the people voted in the last.
25% is generally an odd year. About 25% maybe in a presidential year where it's a big deal.
So that means
Yeah.
12.5% roughly decided who gets to be president.
Yeah, that's right. I just think it's gonna be communities like this that change that, you know?
I just don't know why we're not registered from the get-go. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like in this community, you just never know, cause like, I think I'm gonna put a sign out, but then I also worry about like, will my house get egged? Will someone set fireworks off in front of my house?
Oh, yeah, you do have the fireworks.
We have the
level up
firework
here.
issue.
Yeah, practice bravery is what we're told. But it's a real issue, especially when we got kids here,
Yeah.
you know?
I think we're just so distracted, you know, all these reality shows and, you know, you drive around and you see Seahawks stuff all over, you know?
That is actually the number one most unifying thing of this purple, is the blue and
Well,
gray.
not me,
I can tell you that.
I boycott. I
You're the
boycott them.
exception.
I know, I always.
As I'm going up the doorbells, I've seen some of the cutest paraphernalia you would ever imagine.
We're gonna, you gotta build community, and,
Yeah.
I mean, 10 people in a room is great, but, we need bigger parties where we're having, these out
We had a
parties.
bigger party last.
Total of 47 people
Nice.
through the
Yeah.
house.
So what I'm
Last
saying,
weekend,
tiny
what I'm saying is, we need to find things that bring people
Yeah.
together. We do
That's right.
T-ball in our neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
bring together like 60 people at once, right?
Hey, Vern.
Baseball tends to bring people together for whatever reason it is. Republicans, Democrats that are yelling at each other on social media are now playing T-ball together. So it's things like that I think we have to do, and then when we have people together, use that love.
And make it acceptable to be able to have
So
a
come to
civil
T-ball.
discourse. I would love to come to Devo. That'll be great.
Next time.
All right.
Yeah, if you come to T-ball, there's a lot of people there. I mean, if you really do, it's just the little kids. That's
Oh,
why it's
Well,
fun.
they're the fun ones.
Three through 12. 3-year-olds, 3-10-year-olds, but the parents. So,
It makes me think of bowling alone, and things like that.
No.
By Robert Putnam, it's talk and decline of like social capital and people making connections.
yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot of times though, also with the youth, I think that people tend to go and say, why aren't they? But I also like at Adbeamer, there's like a lot of passionate kids like out there. Like, I mean, that are in high school, and they're super passionate about what's happening. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's not about convincing people. I think it's just about recognizing that, wow, it just, I just think about any of our high schools, it's by the way, like the kids, I mean, the kids are passionate, like, they do care.
They just don't know how to do, what to do.
Yeah.
Well, and then you also have the fact that, okay, we are always in Washington State gonna vote for a blue candidate, right? It's just for president, right? That's the way, so then you get these people that say, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't in certain states.
Right.
That's why the president goes to certain, the candidates go to certain states to campaign.
Yeah.
So until something changes along that line.
Well, I think there's a bit changing too. So, and I can share some of the work that the party is doing. I didn't know much about the party structure until I became a candidate. Then you sort of learn everything, right? But certainly as Democrats, we have not been, we have candidates in all the races from like fire chief up and down. And that in part lowers the stakes of voting. If you think the only thing worth voting for is president and it's already determined, then it's not worth voting. When I told my big brother that I was running for this job, he's like, well, Shannon, it's all determined before, we vote here. I said, Greg, we are the only ones who vote on this election. It's just us. He's like, oh, it's all rigged. I was like, okay. We are from Auburn. I know it. We were born and raised here. But we actually this year in this state have a nearly every race in every place Democratic ballot, right? I think the chair has managed to field a candidate in nearly every race across the state. all the way down. And that's not gonna be magical, but I think the more that these lower, and not lower, but just different, closer to your community roles are actually a contest versus just one incumbent who's running over and over again, then the stakes for voting get higher, because they're a lot more personal and a lot closer. And you know, when you decide to get on the ballot, and when you decide to get on the ballot, they become even higher stakes for everybody around you. And that's part how well things change a
Because
little
there
bit.
are 3 state candidates, this is the first time all of them have run
Yeah,
for office.
for the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And they, I know Immaculate, but did they all get even the Seattle Times endorsement? I know Immaculate got Seattle Times endorsement. It's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. What else can I tell you guys? What else do you want to talk about?
So what are your top 3 issues that you want to go in there and just tackle and win?
Yeah, you know, I am running as a problem solver who gets stuff done. And across the board, that's true. You know, whether it's building, you know, safe, healthy, wealthy, and wise communities, the top 5 things that come up that I am absolutely prepared to tackle seem to be most important to our district for sure. Healthcare, and you know, that's where I have a lot of depth as well. Healthcare, 100%, for me, that means 100% universal access, so truly accessible, which is more than just insurance or payer, affordable, high-quality healthcare for all, and a lot of steps for getting there. Second, that comes up is the environment. So for me, that's protection and mitigation and innovation and investing in our innovation green economy. Third that comes up in these mix up in which priorities, depending who you're talking to, is jobs and wages. Jobs and wages for the middle class. A lot of our collective bargaining and labor unions are under attack right now. And I don't know if anybody here is part of the labor union, but it is getting worse and worse and worse. And wages are not rising at the degree we'd like to see them. There's so many opportunities for infrastructure development across this district, so many opportunities to fight to mobilize some resources to come back and help that will create jobs and improve our ability to grow our economy. Huge. Immigration, clean and clear DACA bill, that is something across this district, you know, and across this country really people want. And also immigration that has a transparent and predictable path, because we have a unique district. And they say, you know, a lot of my long-term workers in this community, they have citizenship or they have a green card, but all of their family living with them doesn't necessarily. And I can't afford to have my, you know, parts of my company who are so worried about their family that it gets in the way of me running my business. And then the 5th is gun violence prevention. So those are the top 5. But the nice thing about Congress is you gotta be ready to move, not just in your top 5, but other things when a window opens, and take advantage of that window when it cracks open so you can move forward. When I did this Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellowship, where I spent a year on the Hill as a senior health staffer to Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, 2013-2014, he had me really early on working on opioid epidemic stuff, because Massachusetts was already having a huge issue with it and having some innovative responses. There was no appetite across Congress, across the country for big legislation on this. And then while I was there, Philip Seymour Hoffman died of his heroin overdose. And suddenly that window went bang open because it became this huge celebrity topic across the country, and there was suddenly then political will. I think he dropped the first Overdose Prevention Act, and you have to have things in your pocket that you're working on over time as well, so that you don't miss the opportunity when it's right in front of you.
What are your thoughts on minimum wage?
I am for a federal $15 an hour minimal wage, and then continuing to up it from there. I think having federal minimum wage makes it an equal playing field for businesses, so that businesses who want to hire minimum are not, you know, competing against those in the same community that have a lower. I think there are ways that states can also dial it up from there if they want to do things like Oregon does, that says in Seattle we're going to have an even higher minimum wage than we do in Chelan, but they shouldn't, because Chelan's really expensive these days. But I'm catching up to a $15 an hour minimum wage and then continuing to keep it with cost of living from there. Yeah. So it's an equal playing field.
What do you say to people, business owners especially, because they're the ones who always voice the concern because it hits them? What do you say to them?
Well, I think the problem is if it's only for a city or if it's applied unequally, it absolutely is true that if you try to do the right thing and your competitor across the street doesn't, you're at a business disadvantage. But when it comes to having it be an equal playing field across businesses, it tends to have a lot less impact. I don't know that it's even shown to have a bad impact as opposed to a positive impact on the whole economy.
Actually, Hartman talked about that
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, and it's never had a negative impact when they've raised wages. You know, because it puts more money in the economy, and then everybody benefits.
No, I'm on your side, I just know what argument
Yeah,
you're gonna
there
get.
is.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier if everybody's going to have to pay the same thing. I'm worried about getting left behind in the same way.
What do you think that says though about, raising, let's say the predominant wage right now in America is $8 an hour. I don't know what the federal minimum is now. Are you talking about going to 15 in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Oh my goodness, I think some of the bills I've seen peg it to 2020 or 2021. So giving predictability, business needs predictability to make business plans. So giving at least a couple, 2 to 3 years to get there, and then making sure you keep up from there on, so it's not this painful to transition ever again. Yeah. You were gonna-
I was just gonna say, it's about 10 to 8, and so maybe we should have like maybe a couple more questions, or one more question, or just.
Didn't that time fly? Thank
Yeah.
you very much, guys.
Yeah.
Well, anybody have one last question?
Well, we were talking earlier about, about how do you get people involved? So, you know, I hand out these Hartman, because I tell people knowledge is power, you know, and he just talks so easily that people understand. I've got my legislators' numbers in my phone address book, so, you know, it's
You have my
really-
number in your phone address book, so you're already ready.
Yeah, you'll be hearing from me. So it's quick and easy to call your legislators. And then there's a 5 calls app. Yeah, it's an app, 5 calls, and it tells you some of the top bills that they're talking about. Protect the special counsel, vote no on Kavanaugh. And then you press that, and then it'll explain it to you. And then it gives your senators numbers and whatnot. And they're really wonderful tools, because if they don't hear from us, you know, whether it's pro or against, even, you know, we have Democratic senators, you know, calling and saying, you know, I'm with you, thank you for voting that way. And then they can say, you know, I've had, you know, 75,000 calls on this, you know. So that's my wish.
The number 5 or FIDE?
The number.
Number 5.
You had
So
one
if you
else.
are elected, what are your priorities going in? I mean, like, what can you imagine yourself going into Congress? What do you see? And then my second part is, if the House is flipped,
When?
when? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just.
Yeah, no.
Right, but if that happens, what do you think as the new majority is like the most urgent priority? Like,
Yeah.
that needs to take action?
I think we talked a little bit about priorities when you were
Okay.
calming kids down, but I'll give you some other sort of urgent answers. Everybody's like, thank you. So I do think we're going to flip the House. I think we have to flip the House, and that is going to be the number one most important thing to determine what we can do. I think January 2019, we're really gonna have to see what the most urgent priorities are, because I tell you, every day it seems like there's something new bubbling up. So we have to be agile and flexible. If I could wave my magic wand and have sort of a big, bold issue, simple, but big, bold, I would, the number one thing I would wanna push forward right away, and I'm sure there's other people pushing it, is lowering drug prices by using the bargaining power of Medicare. Eliminating the prohibition on Medicare bargaining with pharmaceutical companies over the prices on pharma. We are the single largest buyer of pharmaceuticals of anybody in the world. We should be getting economies of scale that give us fair prices, and they help everyone. Now, that's a big, bold thing. Something that sort of sounds either little or sort of bold, but I am actually completely convinced that we can push it forward, has to do what we talked about at the beginning today, which is putting together a bill for CDC to resume gun violence prevention research, and not on a business as usual kind of track. And that, I think, will pull other things forward as well. Yeah, but we'll see what is at the forefront. I hope it's not, we're destabilizing a lot these days, between the trade wars, between today was name calling with Iran, I think. Korea, global diplomacy is a little scary right now.
It's probably premature to ask you this question, but what's the feeling amongst the Democrats in terms of the I word?
Yeah, the impeachment word. I think that there are extremes, and there's folks in the middle. For me, I definitely say I want to see the rest of the Mueller investigation. I actually think we're going to find more than we originally expected in that. I want to see what the most urgent priorities are January 2019, because I don't want us to get distracted by impeachment when there are other things that need to be fixed. We need to have everything going at once. And I think that going impeachment or not has to depend on the actual things that come out of the investigation to meet articles of impeachment. And then the timing becomes an issue in terms of the next election coming up, and when's the best timing to do that. But I think if the Mueller investigation shows the proof, then we need to go forward on that. And I suspect that will be the case.
So here's the whopper question.
Yeah.
What happens when Trump fires Mueller?
Well, I think we'll see. I think it'll be
will happen.
Do you think?
I don't think Congress has a spine.
They don't. They're afraid of him for some reason.
He'll be fired, and he'll just start firing off tweets about some other country doesn't. And then we'll be distracted with that. We're a bright, shiny object, moths in the flame.
We aren't, but his followers are.
Well, I think we are. We follow the stupid news too.
But
and
if
it
we
distracts us.
We can flip Congress.
We gotta vote.
You
You gotta
gotta-
get
Then
everyone
Congress
to
can
vote.
But are we gonna
sanction,
flip
and
the-
Congress can do all
Or are we
kinds
gonna
of
flip
things.
the Senate?
No.
No, but we can still, it's not the same power if you don't have both chambers, but you would at least finally have one chamber holding the president accountable.
Better than
And that
nothing.
is better for popular
But then
opinion as well.
He's still got like
Yeah.
another whole month and a half to do whatever he wants before the new Congress comes in.
Okay. I mean, it
Where they
is
can come in
is
and
what it
say,
is.
"Screw 'em all."
It is what it is. I am hopeful that when we flip the leadership of the House, that there is a number of Republicans, I don't know if that's a tiny number or a moderate number, who on certain issues,
Might follow.
with the cover of having Democrats in leadership, might vote with us on certain things.
So, this is a question
Yeah.
for the Dems, like, is the sense that the Senate is going to stay pretty much the way it is, and that really the only option where all
I think
eggs
they're
are going
saying
out?
there's a slight chance.
Slight
Yeah,
chance.
that's what I thought.
Slight chance.
Okay.
It's a weird year for us for the Senate because we have disproportionately more Democratic seats that are up for re-election and fewer Republican seats. So there's fewer opportunities to flip.
It could get worse.
Yeah. Or it could get a lot better, but that's all. I mean, we really do not have a crystal ball on what's going to happen in terms of turnout. We've got our 100% vote by mail here. We now have postage for everyone. Every single person in this room, I'm guessing, has gotten your ballot. Clearly, I am here asking for your support, asking for your vote. I think I'm the person to beat Dino Rossi and get up on the hill and get some stuff done and be that voice of voting. If you like what you heard or see, do tell your friends and family as well, because I'd love all their votes too. But we've got to do as much as we can to get everybody to vote. I think it is never recently been a more important election for that.
Can either of the other, in your opinion, Democratic candidates beat Dino Rossi?
In my opinion, no. Other people, they would tell you the opposite, right? Of all things being fair, they'd say the opposite. I think a couple of things. Number one, I'm the only candidate in this race who brings this proven track record of delivering results with federal people, policy, and dollars that matter to people during this time when people are frustrated with lack of action, lack of results. Dino Rossi can't say that. And he talks really smoothly. He's got everybody convinced he is the moderate, middle-of-the-road, bipartisan kind of guy right now.
He loses a lot, so don't worry.
But he's going to be really formidable.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, and so to be able to say, you show me yours, I'll show you mine.
Here's the
Let's
thing.
throw down.
He does not, he is just going to be biker all over again. He's going to talk the talk. He's never going to show up. He's never going to answer the questions you ask him. Like, I'm sorry.
Oh, now
He's
we
going to
know
be
where
worse.
stand.
He is. Yeah, that's right. He was actually a Trump delegate. So he
That's all you need
has
to
much
say, right there.
stronger opinions than Reichert does.
Yeah, I mean, at least Riker in
Yeah.
his career took care of people on some level at
Yeah.
some point. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So rally, and I think it's going to be a big deal to rally. As I mentioned, I think the Dems think I'm the person to beat them. I think they're right, and I'm committed to doing the work to make that happen. But I need everybody's help to do it.
Come to T-ball.
Come to T-ball.
Anybody wants to go door knocking,
12:30 to 3.
call me.
Yeah, so
So
we've
they
got
come
door
33?
knocking or come to our office to
Right down
do
there.
phone banking, even virtual phone banking from your house, which is just calling people up, and now it's saying you got your ballot. Let me tell you about Shannon.
I will do
Yeah,
virtual
and
phone banking.
Awesome.
I have difficulty, like I'm afraid if I go knock on someone's door, particularly in this neighborhood, I just don't want to do that.
You know what, we'll have Brandon, make sure you put a star by her name, and we'll get her phone banking. It'll be good.
And even canvassing right now, we're switching to GOTV. So pretty
People don't
much
know what that is, get out the vote.
get out the vote. Yes. So pretty much we'll be talking to people that we've already identified as being Shannon supporters.
Okay.
And we'll just be talking to them and saying, hey, how about that ballot?
Where's that ballot of yours?
I mean, and that's what I've heard is most effective too, so, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we find out every day, like once every 24 hours is not perfect, but we find out who did or didn't turn in their ballot once every 24 hours.
Okay.
So once if you get tired of being harassed by a candidate ever, the best antidote to that is to vote and turn your ballot.
So,
They'll stop bothering you.
is there a way to get a drop box in Tahoe?
Now that they cover postage, probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Dropbox is just, it's
Oh, yeah,
just
we can
like
just
down
stick it in the
the
mail.
street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stick in the mail.
Do you
It's
know-
not down the street when you only have 10 minutes to get there. That's
It's
what
on,
That
it's
is
on
true.
your,
Yeah.
it's on your.
You gotta wait, you gotta go more than 10 minutes at a time.
Good. I put mine on Sunday. Yay. Thank
But
you.
that's another barrier, right? It's always been a
Didn't
barrier.
get pulled over.
Did you
But,
see
so yeah, but yeah.
No.
So you
Was
can
the
mail it.
guy standing there ready to
Not that wasn't asked by
unlock
someone
it
else.
and take up
She
Nelson
told me
again
no.
as an Olympia?
She told me no. And I
I
said,
really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come out
It was
and fancy
fun
stuff here.
it-
Thank you so much. And thanks for a really fun conversation, a meaningful conversation. I think, see, I'm a geek, I think that's fun. I think determining our better future is actually fun because it's so important.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you guys, I didn't feel like this was almost 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
But
definitely.
I want to respect your time, and you're already half an hour. About that.
All right.